A woman told me something last month that stopped me cold. We were at a dinner party, surrounded by successful professionals in their 30s and 40s, and somehow the conversation turned to dating. She was 34, attractive, educated, good career, never married. And she said with complete sincerity, "I don't understand where all the men went." I looked around the room. There were 7 men within earshot, all single, all employed, all reasonably put together. They were right there, literally within arm's reach, and she couldn't see them. That moment crystallized something I'd been noticing for years. There's a massive disconnect between what women say they want, what they think is available, and what's actually standing in front of them. And men over 30 are caught in the middle of this confusion, simultaneously invisible and essential, overlooked and overworked, dismissed and desperately needed. Today, we're going to talk about what women really think about men over 30. Not the polished answers she gives in surveys, not the diplomatic version she shares with co-workers, the actual cognitive landscape, the contradictions, the frustrations, the expectations that don't match reality, and why understanding this terrain is essential for any man navigating the post-30 dating world. This isn't about attacking women, it's about mapping the psychology accurately so you can stop being confused by feedback that seems contradictory, because it often is contradictory. Let me start with perception 1. Where did all the men go? Women genuinely believe there's a shortage of good men. This isn't performance, they feel it viscerally. They look at their dating options and see emptiness. They scroll through apps and feel despair. They attend social events and leave alone. The experience of scarcity is real to them, even when objectively men exist in abundance. What's actually happening? 2 things. First, she's not seeing most men. The man who doesn't meet minimum threshold, height, income, appearance, social proof, isn't registered as a man at all. He's background noise, furniture. She literally doesn't perceive him as a romantic option. So when she scans for available men, he doesn't appear in her count. She's asking, where are the men? While surrounded by men she's filtered out of visibility. Second, the men she does see aren't approaching. They're not initiating. They're not buying drinks or starting conversations or demonstrating interest. They exist, but they're passive. From her perspective, a man who doesn't pursue isn't really available. He's just decorative. So the men who meet her threshold but don't approach might as well not exist either. This creates the paradox. Rooms full of men, 0 men available. Millions of profiles, no one worth matching. The scarcity is subjective, but it feels objective. And when she complains about the absence of men, she's not lying. She's describing her actual experience. The experience is just filtered through selection criteria and behavioral expectations that eliminate most of the supply. Let me talk about why men aren't approaching. Because women notice this constantly. The complaint is universal among women over 30. Men don't approach anymore. Nobody asks me out. Where's the effort? They remember, or imagine, a past where men were proactive, bold, willing to risk rejection for the chance at connection. That past feels gone. Several things happened. First, the risk-reward calculation shifted. Approaching women now carries social risk it didn't before. A miscalibrated approach can be labelled harassment. A workplace interest can become an HR complaint. A bar conversation that goes wrong can become a social media post. Men watched other men get destroyed for approaches that went badly. They learned. The downside of approaching is catastrophic. The upside is marginal. So they stopped. Second, dating apps created an alternative. Why risk rejection in person when you can swipe from safety? The app provides mutual filtering. You only interact with women who've already indicated interest. The cold approach that used to be necessary is now avoidable. Men who would have approached in previous generations simply stopped because a less painful option appeared. Third, women's stated preferences created confusion. The messaging has been, don't approach me at the gym, don't talk to me while I'm shopping, don't comment on my appearance, don't assume I'm available. Men heard this. They believed it. They stopped doing the things women said they didn't want. And now women are confused about why men took them at their word. The irony is brutal. Women said, leave me alone, and men left them alone. Now women are lonely and blaming men for compliance. But from the male perspective, the mixed signals were paralyzing. approach and risk destruction, or don't approach and be blamed for passivity. There's no winning position, so men chose the one that minimized personal risk. Let me address the age dynamic, because this is where women's confusion peaks. Here's the biological reality that nobody wants to discuss honestly. Men's attraction preferences don't age with them. A 35-year-old man, a 45-year-old man, a 55-year-old man, they're all attracted to women in roughly the same age range. Young, fertile. The markers of youth that evolution programmed men to respond to don't change just because his birthday does. Women find this unfair, offensive even. The 40-year-old woman thinks she should be competing for 40-year-old men, but the 40-year-old man, if he has options, is looking at 30-year-olds, or 28-year-olds, or younger. His attractions haven't updated to match his age because attractions aren't software you can patch. Meanwhile, women's preferences do age, but in the opposite direction. Women often want older men. The 25-year-old woman finds the 35-year-old man attractive because he's established, confident, resourced. The 35-year-old woman finds the 45-year-old attractive for the same reasons. Women age upward in preference while men's preferences stay static or even trend younger. This creates catastrophic mismatch for women over 30. She wants men her age or older. Those men want women her age or younger. She's competing against younger women for the same pool of desirable men, and she's losing. Not because something's wrong with her, because the math is the math. The men she wants have options she can't outcompete. Women experience this as rejection, as being passed over, as the dating market suddenly turning hostile around 30. And they're right that something changed. What changed is the competitive landscape. The men she's selecting for now have access to women she wasn't competing against when she was 25. The game got harder because the game actually did get harder. Let me talk about women's selectivity, because this compounds the problem. When researchers show women profiles and ask for ratings, women rate 80% of men as below average attractiveness. Think about that, 80% below average. In a world where average means 50th percentile, women's perception places the vast majority of men in the unattractive category. Men's ratings work differently. Men rate women on a normal distribution. Some above average, some below, most clustered in the middle. The mathematical bell curve that should describe reality actually describes male perception of female attractiveness. But female perception of male attractiveness is skewed dramatically. A tiny percentage deemed attractive, the overwhelming majority deemed not. This means when a woman says, "I can't find anyone attractive," she's not lying. From her subjective perception, attractive men are rare. But what she's experiencing isn't objective scarcity. It's perceptual filtering so aggressive that it eliminates most of the supply before evaluation even begins. The attractive men, the top 10, 15, 20% who register as options, know they're in that category. They experience abundance. Women match them. Women pursue them. Women compete for them. These men develop rosters, options. They don't commit because commitment isn't required when access is easy. They play the field because the field plays back. So the woman over 30 faces a landscape where most men are invisible to her, and the men who are visible are unlikely to commit to her specifically. She can either recalibrate her perception, start seeing the men she's been filtering out, or continue competing for the shrinking pool of men she currently finds acceptable. Most choose to continue competing, most lose. Let me discuss the friend zone phenomenon. Because women apply this without understanding its effects. Women have in their immediate social circles men who would date them, men who are interested, available, and have demonstrated care over time. These men get categorized as friends. The woman values them, genuinely values them, but not as romantic options. They're support, companionship, emotional resources, but not partners. Why not? Because they don't trigger attraction. They're too available, too consistent, too safe. The very qualities that make them good friends, reliability, emotional stability, genuine care, are the qualities that prevent them from being seen as romantic options. Attraction for many women requires an element of uncertainty, status, challenge. The good guy in the friend zone provides certainty, normalcy, and ease. Wrong category. Meanwhile, she's pursuing men who won't commit to her. Men with options, men who keep her rotating, men who give her the uncertainty she interprets as attraction, while providing none of the stability she claims to want. And she sits confused, Why can't I find someone good? While someone good texts her asking if she wants to hang out. This is selective perception in action. The men who would treat her well are placed in a category that excludes romance. The men who won't treat her well are placed in a category that includes romance. Then she experiences there are no good men because the good men have been sorted into the wrong box, the box where she can't see them as options. Let me talk about effort expectations, because this reveals real contradiction. Women over 30 have clear expectations about male effort. He should approach. He should plan dates. He should pay, at least initially. He should drive the relationship forward. He should lead. He should handle logistics. He should prove himself worthy of her selection. These expectations come from traditional frameworks, the frameworks where men led and provided and protected. And women are still drawing from these frameworks when it comes to dating effort. They want the traditional benefits, pursued, provided for, led. But they don't want the traditional obligations. They don't want to submit to male leadership. They don't want to prioritize his career over hers. They don't want to accept the exchange that traditional frameworks involved, his provision in exchange for her support, his leadership in exchange for her deference. The result is a selective extraction of benefits without corresponding responsibilities. She wants him to pursue like it's 1955 while she maintains independence like it's 2025. She wants his effort and protection without the framework that made those efforts make sense for him. She wants the deal that worked when both sides delivered their half, but only her half of receiving, not her half of providing. Men over 30 notice this. They feel used by the expectation to perform traditional male duties while receiving none of the traditional male benefits. They're supposed to plan and pay and lead and prove themselves, and then what? Then they get a partner who competes with them, prioritizes her career equivalently, expects 50-50 on domestic labour, and brings little that specifically requires traditional male provision. The question that men ask, consciously or unconsciously, if I'm supposed to perform traditional masculinity in dating, why does traditional masculinity get rejected in relationships? Why lead the approach if I can't lead the partnership? Why provide if provision isn't valued? The misalignment between dating expectations and relationship expectations creates exhaustion and withdrawal. Men stop performing the dating script because the performance doesn't lead anywhere they want to go. Let me address dating app dynamics, because this is where the asymmetry crystallizes. On dating apps, women experience abundance and men experience scarcity. The same platform, completely different realities. She matches with most of the men she swipes on. He matches with a tiny fraction. She has more conversations than she can maintain. He's grateful for any response. She's filtering aggressively to manage volume. He's trying desperately to generate any interest. This asymmetry creates behavioral patterns. She becomes more selective because she can afford to be. Why settle for a 7 when 8s are matching her? Why meet someone who seems fine when someone who seems great is waiting? The abundance of options makes each individual option less valuable. She becomes harder to impress because she's constantly comparing against alternatives. Meanwhile, he's aware of this dynamic. He knows he's competing against hundreds of other matches. He knows his message is one of 50 she received today. He knows that any misstep, wrong opener, wrong timing, wrong vibe, and she moves to the next option instantly. The pressure to perform is enormous, and the performance is often impossible because he's competing against factors outside his control. The men who succeed on apps are the men who photograph exceptionally well, who trigger instant attraction, who meet the threshold that gets past aggressive filtering. These men, maybe 15% of the male population on the app, absorb most of the female attention. Everyone else exists in a wasteland of ignored messages and stale matches. For women over 30, this creates a specific problem. She's matching with high-value men who have overwhelming options. These men respond to her. She's attractive enough to be in their rotation, but they don't commit to her. She cycles through conversations that go nowhere, dates that don't progress, connections that fizzle. And she concludes, the apps are broken, the men are broken, something is broken. What's actually broken is the expectation that high-option men will commit when commitment requires nothing from her that's different from all the other women also trying to lock them down. Let me talk about the social dynamics, because women police each other. When men consider approaching women in social settings, they face a wall of female friends. The cute woman doesn't exist in isolation, she exists in a cluster. and the cluster often functions as protective barrier, discouraging male approach. Why? Several reasons. The friends might be less attractive and resentful that attention goes to the cute one. They might be bitter about their own dating failures and want company in their misery. They might genuinely believe they are protecting her from bad men. Whatever the motivation, the behaviour is consistent. Make approach difficult, screen aggressively, reject men on her behalf. The man sees this. He considers approaching. He notices the wall of friends who will evaluate him, potentially mock him, certainly create social risk, and he thinks, not worth it. The pain of rejection in front of an audience exceeds the potential gain of connection, so he doesn't approach, and she goes home wondering why no one talked to her while her friends celebrated their protection. This is the gatekeeping problem. Women often don't realise their social circles function as deterrents. They think they're being supportive, they're actually being exclusionary. The men who would approach are filtered out by the social cost of approaching. The only men who persist are either very confident or very undeterred by social consequences, categories that don't always correlate with good partnership. Let me address the contradiction at the core, because this is what men find exhausting. Women over 30 often express contradictory desires. They want a provider but resent provision as implying dependence. They want a leader but resist being led. They want a protector but claim they don't need protection. They want traditional masculinity and attraction, but progressive partnership in relationship. These contradictions aren't necessarily conscious. She doesn't sit down and decide to be contradictory. But the contradictions exist, and the men encountering them experience whiplash. What does she actually want? He can't tell. Because what she says she wants, what she responds to, and what she criticizes him for failing to provide are often three different things. The provider who provides too much is controlling. The leader who leads too assertively is domineering. The protector who protects too visibly is patronizing. But the man who doesn't provide, lead, or protect is weak, passive, and unattractive. The window of acceptable behavior is razor thin and shifts constantly based on her mood, the context, and factors he can't predict. Men over 30 have often developed a response to this: strategic withdrawal. They stop trying to thread the needle. They stop attempting to satisfy contradictory demands. They focus on their own lives, their own goals, their own satisfaction. If relationship effort leads to criticism regardless of what they do, they minimize effort. If no behavior is consistently right, they stop trying to be right. This withdrawal looks like passivity to women, like laziness, like men giving up. And in a sense, they have given up trying to solve a puzzle with contradictory rules. But from the male perspective, it's rational adaptation. Stop playing games where you lose regardless of moves. Let me discuss what women actually find attractive, because this often conflicts with what they say. Women say they want kind, caring, emotionally available men, nice guys, safe guys, good communicators. In surveys and interviews, these traits top the list. But attraction doesn't follow surveys. Attraction is triggered by different traits than the ones that appear on wish lists. Women respond to confidence, status, dominance, unpredictability. The traits that create attraction are often traits that create relationship difficulty. The man who gives her butterflies is often the man who gives her problems. The man who feels safe is often the man who feels boring. There's a gap between what creates attraction and what creates partnership. This creates a specific pattern. She pursues the man who triggers attraction, the confident, dominant, high-status man. He doesn't commit because he has options and she's not special enough to override them. She experiences heartbreak. Then she claims to want the nice guy. But when the nice guy appears, he doesn't trigger attraction. He feels like settling, so she's back pursuing the attractive but unavailable while complaining about the unavailability. Men over 30 see this pattern. They see women declaring preferences that don't match their behaviours. They see the nice guys finishing last and the jerks finishing first, and they draw conclusions. Some develop dark triad traits, narcissism, Machiavellianism, psychopathy, because those traits seem to work. Others withdraw entirely, deciding the game isn't worth playing. Few believe that being the good guy produces good outcomes. Let me address age-specific frustrations, because women over 30 feel specific pressure. She feels her market position weakening. Not imaginary, real. The men she wants are pursuing younger women. The attention she received at 25 has diminished. The matches come slower. The dates are less frequent. The biological clock, whether she wants children or not, creates psychological pressure from society, family, and internal comparison to peers who've already settled. This pressure creates desperation that men can sense. The overcager messages, the moving too fast, the willingness to tolerate behaviour she wouldn't have tolerated at 25. The desperation doesn't attract men, it repels them. But she can't hide it because it's real. She feels time slipping, she feels options narrowing. And the urgency bleeds through no matter how hard she tries to suppress it. Men over 30, the ones with options, recognise this desperation. They know she's feeling the squeeze, and some take advantage. They string her along, keep her in rotation, extract what they want without committing what she needs, because they can. Because her desperation makes her tolerate what she shouldn't. Because her weakening position reduces her leverage. This creates the experience women describe as men playing games. But from the male perspective, it's not really games. It's just responding to market conditions. She's signalling availability without commanding commitment. She's offering access without extracting exclusivity. He's responding rationally to what she's making possible. Let me talk about what men over 30 actually experience. Because understanding this helps make sense of male behaviour. Men over 30 are often at peak market value. Their careers have developed, their resources have accumulated, their confidence is solidified. If they've maintained their health and social skills, they're more attractive now than they were at 25. The dynamic has shifted in their favour. This creates a new experience. Options. The man who struggled at 23 now has women interested. The man who couldn't get dates now has women pursuing. The scarcity that defined his 20s has become abundance in his 30s. And with abundance comes behavioural change. He becomes more selective. Why settle when there are options? He becomes less eager. Why chase when they come to him? He becomes harder to lock down. Why commit when freedom is finally enjoyable? The behaviours that women find frustrating, the non-commitment, the dating around, the keeping her at arm's length, these are often behaviours of men finally experiencing the abundance that women experience their whole lives. Women describe this as men being immature or afraid of commitment. But from his perspective, it's not immaturity. It's finally having the leverage to choose rather than settle. It's having options for the first time and being reluctant to foreclose them. It's the flip side of what women experienced in their 20s and what they're now experiencing the absence of. The same behaviour, playing the field, keeping options open, avoiding commitment, gets different labels depending on who's doing it. When she had options and played the field, she was figuring out what she wanted. When he has options and plays the field, he's commitment phobic. The behaviour is identical. The moral evaluation shifts based on gender. Let me close with what actually happens when men and women over 30 try to connect. Both sides are frustrated. Both sides feel misunderstood. Both sides have legitimate grievances that the other side doesn't fully appreciate. She feels unseen, she's accomplished, mature, ready for partnership, and the men she wants don't want her. The men who want her don't trigger her attraction. She's caught between standards she won't lower and a market that won't meet them. Every year she waits, the situation worsens. But lowering standards feels like surrender. He feels unappreciated. He's built himself into someone worthy of partnership, and women still want something more, different, other. The effort he expended to become successful isn't valued the way he expected. The women who want him often want what he provides rather than who he is. The women he wants are chasing men with even more. He's enough and not enough simultaneously. They meet somewhere. An app, a party, a setup. They go on dates. The dynamic is awkward because both bring accumulated frustration. She's watching for signs he's another player. He's watching for signs she's another woman who wants his status, but not him. Trust is low. Guards are up. Both are auditioning while trying not to seem like they're auditioning. Sometimes it works. They find alignment. They're genuinely compatible rather than just available. They build something despite the obstacles. These relationships exist. They're not unicorns. But often it doesn't work. The mismatch is too great. Her expectations collide with his experience. His expectations collide with her position. Neither can give what the other needs without compromising something core. They part ways, another failed attempt in a sequence of failed attempts, and return to their respective frustrations. Here's what both sides need to understand. For women over 30, the men exist. They're around you. But you've filtered most of them into invisibility, and the visible ones have options that make them hard to lock down. Recalibrating what you're looking for might serve you better than continuing to compete for a shrinking pool. For men over 30, the frustration you perceive is real to her even when it seems misplaced. Her experience of scarcity is genuine even if it's self-created. Understanding her psychology doesn't require agreeing with it, but it helps you navigate the landscape with less confusion. For both, the current dating market is dysfunctional. It's not producing the pairings that lead to stable relationships and families. Both sides are dissatisfied. Both sides have valid grievances. Neither side's solution, women waiting for better, men withdrawing entirely, is actually solving anything. The path forward requires recognition that the other side isn't the enemy, that their frustrations are real even when misguided. That connection requires compromise from both directions, not just unilateral demands that the other side change while you stay the same. This is what women really think about men over 30. Confusion, frustration, contradictory expectations and underlying desperation that grows with each passing year. It's not a coherent picture because it's not coherent thinking. It's a collision of desires, market positions, social pressures and evolutionary wiring that produces behavior that seems irrational because it often is. Understanding this doesn't make dating easier, but it makes the confusion understandable, and understanding why things are confusing is the first step toward navigating the confusion without losing yourself in the process. I have more content on navigating modern dating dynamics, on understanding what's actually happening beneath surface behavior, on building connections that work despite broken frameworks. Links in the description if this resonated. For now, tell me in the comments, what patterns have you noticed? What confusion have you experienced? What do you wish the other side understood? Share honestly, not to attack, to illuminate. Because clarity is what both sides need most. That's it for today. Stop expecting coherence where there isn't any. Start navigating the actual landscape rather than the one you wish existed. And remember, they're as confused as you are, they just express it differently.